Imagine your brain is screaming danger every time you're alone. Not because you're in a dark alley, but because you're sitting quietly in your apartment with the Wi-Fi off. That panic isn't weakness. It is a 300,000-year-old alarm system going off. Section 1. The Evolutionary Trap. Homo sapiens survived the Pleistocene era because we were hypersocial primates. For our ancestors, lone individuals had a life expectancy you could measure in hours. Exile from the tribe was functionally a death sentence. Therefore, natural selection wired us with a social monitoring system that never shuts off. When perceived social isolation rises, the brain treats it like a physical threat detection. Functional MRI studies conducted by Eisenberger and colleagues, published in the journal Science in 2003, show that social exclusion activates the exact same regions as physical pain, specifically the anterior cingulate cortex and the right ventral prefrontal cortex. The neurochemistry is identical. Research by Cacioppo in 2015 revealed that cortisol spikes, norepinephrine surges, and inflammatory markers like IL-6 increase within 30 minutes of experimentally induced loneliness. Your modern brain still believes that being alone equals, "I'm about to be eaten by a hyena." That is not a metaphor. It is a false positive alarm that has outlived its usefulness.
Section 2. The Neuroscience. Most people think the brain is quiet when we're doing nothing. The opposite is true. When external task demands drop to zero, the default mode network, or DMN, becomes the single most metabolically active system in the brain. It consumes roughly 20% of total body energy while you simply stare at a wall. The core hubs of this network are the medial prefrontal cortex, the posterior cingulate cortex, the inferior parietal lobule, and the temporal pole. In 2001, Dr. Marcus Reichel published a paper in PNAS proving that this is not rest. It is the brain's highest priority operating mode. The DMN is responsible for autobiographical memory consolidation, future simulation, theory of mind, and creative incubation. Meta-analyses by Buckner in 2008 and Andrews-Hanna in 2014 show that creative insight correlates directly with the connectivity strength of this network and the duration of uninterrupted activation. But the moment you pick up your phone or talk to someone, DMN activity is suppressed by the task positive network. In plain terms, every notification is literally turning off the part of your brain that generates original thought. Solitude isn't empty. It is the only state in which the most expensive real estate in your cortex is allowed to run at full capacity.
Section 3. The Dopamine Detox. Social media and constant conversation hijack the mesolimbic dopamine pathway the same way slot machines do. Every like, reply, or text triggers a phasic dopamine burst in the nucleus accumbens. Studies by Volkov in 2011 demonstrated that over time, the brain downregulates D2 receptors and reduces endogenous dopamine synthesis to maintain homeostasis. The result is that your baseline mood drops, and you now require external social input just to feel normal. However, long-term studies on voluntary digital detox by Tromholt in 2016 and Hunt in 2018 show that just 7 to 14 days of reduced social input increases tonic dopamine levels and restores D2 receptor density. Surprisingly, this raises subjective well-being scores more than antidepressants do in mild cases. More importantly, prolonged solitude of more than 4 hours shifts reward valuation from extrinsic sources, like likes, to intrinsic sources, like flow states. The same neural circuitry that once chased retweets now chases the much larger, slower dopamine release of solving a hard intellectual problem. You are not bored. You are simply withdrawing from the cheapest dopamine source humanity has ever engineered.
Section 4.
Social conformity. Beyond chemistry, there is the issue of intelligence. In the 1950s, Solomon Asch demonstrated that when people are placed in a group with even mild social pressure, 76% will deny objective reality at least once. Modern neuroimaging replications by Burns in 2005, published in Biological Psychiatry, reveal why. Social disagreement activates the amygdala and the right temporoparietal junction as strongly as making a mathematical mistake. The brain codes being different as danger. More recent work by Schnell in 2011 and Klucharev in 2009, using EEG recordings, shows that group presence triggers feedback-related negativity and suppresses the anterior cingulate activity needed for independent error monitoring. Translation: your prefrontal cortex partially shuts down when others are watching or speaking. A meta-analysis of 133 studies by Bond and Smith in 1996 confirms that conformity reduces individual IQ performance on complex tasks by up to 1 standard deviation in real time. Being in a group literally makes you dumber on anything that requires original thought. Solitude is the only condition under which your full cognitive horsepower is legally allowed to operate.
Section 5. The Shadow. Finally, we must address the psychological root. Carl Jung observed that most people spend their entire lives running from what he called the shadow, the repository of repressed traits, impulses, and memories that the ego labels unacceptable. In the presence of others, the persona, or social mask, dominates consciousness. The shadow stays safely buried because social feedback reinforces the mask. Remove external observers, and the ego loses its primary defense mechanism. Within hours of true solitude, the shadow begins to surface: unprocessed shame, rage, and existential dread. This is experienced as acute discomfort, often labeled boredom or anxiety. Neuropsychoanalytic research by Solms and Turnbull in 2002 and Carhart-Harris in 2010 shows that deep states of solitude are mediated by transient hypofrontality, a temporary downregulation of the prefrontal control structures. The same thing happens naturally after 48 to 72 hours of complete solitude. People don't fear being alone. They fear the unfiltered contents of their own mind when the social mirror is removed.
Section 6. Conclusion. Solitude is not optional. Every major advance in science, philosophy, and art required prolonged solitude. Newton during the plague year, Ramanujan alone in his room, Nietzsche walking the Alps, all incubated in DMN-dominant states away from social interference. Your brain did not evolve to be happy in perpetual connection. It evolved to survive. High-level cognition and creativity are expensive side effects that only emerge when the social monitoring system is temporarily turned off. Solitude is not a luxury for introverts. It is a non-negotiable neurobiological requirement for any human being who wants to think thoughts that have never been thought before. The cortisol spike is real. The discomfort is real. The shadow is real. And so is the payoff. Turn everything off. Close the door. Your brain has work to do that only you can authorize.